So welcome back to our fourth annual research symposium. I have the privilege today of introducing to you our very own academic outreach specialist, correct, Michael? Dr. Michael Robinson. Congratulations, and we look forward to hearing more about an examination of emotional management embedded teacher professional development. Michael, you have the floor.
All right, thanks so much. Welcome to the 2022 UAGC Research Symposium. If you're just joining us, and thank you to those who have participated and attended thus far. It's been great. I am Dr. Michael A. Robinson. I am really excited to be here. This presentation is on my research study entitled An Examination of Emotional Management Embedded Teacher Professional Development. Kind of a tongue twister there. I want to urge folks, pose questions in the chat. Please don't be shy. It's a really important topic, and we'll have some discussion time at the end of this. Also, please check out the wonderful e-posters from this symposium. So much great work going on here at UAGC. Before we begin, I'd like to thank Dr. Peggy Sundstrom for this opportunity and for all her hard work with this symposium. I'd also like to thank Dr. Sheila Schmitz for introducing me, facilitating this, and her guidance and support with the preparation for this. So I conducted a study on teacher wellness by looking at a specific type of teacher professional development in Denver Public Schools District in Denver, Colorado. This PD, which is what I'm going to call professional development throughout this PD focused on improving specific teacher emotional management strategies, strategies that positively contribute to teacher wellness. Okay. Excuse me. So a little bit about me before we get into the research study itself. I am a recent graduate of the University of Arizona Global Campus with a PhD in education. As Sheila mentioned, I also work for the university as an academic outreach specialist in the Office of Assessment and Curricular Affairs, as well as my role as an associate faculty member. I'm a former high school teacher for many, many years, which I'll get into on the next slide, and also a former doctoral advisor at UAGC for about 5 years before transitioning to administration a couple years ago. My real passion in life, creating a comfortable environment for students to learn. Like Dr. Watson mentioned this morning, I am also a teacher at heart. That's my passion. So the reason the topic of teacher wellness is an important passion for me is because I had some personal experiences with burnout. I taught high school language arts and social studies for over 12 years, 4 different districts, 6 schools all over Colorado. There were some inner city public schools, some suburban public schools, rural public schools, charter schools, even an alternative contract school about 9,000 feet up in the mountains. I've been a department head. I've been a coach for multiple sports, graduation MC, mentor teacher. Internationally, I've also been a guest lecturer and adjunct faculty in Beijing, China. During my teaching tenure, I experienced a bit of teacher burnout. It's really a syndrome expressed by emotional exhaustion. And there was one school where I attended PD on emotional management. So the research study itself is not a study on teacher burnout. This is more of a study on teacher wellness. As I'll get into with the literature, there's a ton of literature on teacher burnout. And a lot of it consists of the causes of it and what happens when burnout happens with a teacher. But I wanted to focus more on the positive. What's going to make teachers better? Teachers who are experiencing burnout, it affects everybody. And there's got to be a way we can make this better for teachers. So the problem in this study, the general problem, was teacher burnout. The specific problem was the efficacy of how school districts use PD to really improve teacher emotional management strategies. And the purpose was to understand teacher perceptions of the efficacy of these emotional management PD sessions. As I mentioned, studying teacher perceptions of this type of PD is really important, not just for Denver Public Schools, but for all schools, all stakeholders, administrators, teachers, students everywhere. This study could guide the way future professional development addresses burnout. When I was reviewing the literature on burnout and emotional exhaustion, I found there was a lot of literature, again, looking at what happens when a teacher is burnout, what's causing it, but not a lot of research on ways to help teachers and make it better for everyone. When teachers are burnout, it affects everyone in the system, particularly students. So I'll briefly get into the research questions, conceptual framework. You can see here, overview of the literature, the methodology, all of that, but that's before I get to the real good stuff at the end, the results, the discussion. So the research questions that guided this study, first, the primary research question was, what are participant perceptions on the efficacy of the emotional management PD? Research sub-question 1 was, what are participant perceptions of burnout? And research sub-question 2, what are participant perceptions on the effectiveness of the emotional management PD to support teacher wellness? In reviewing the literature on teacher wellness, you can see here, I reviewed a lot of sources, let's just say, well over 200 sources. Looked at scholarly books, peer-reviewed journals, a lot of other journals, periodicals even, reports. And, you know, sorry for the fine print in the chart here, but you could see a majority of the sources were peer-reviewed journals. And a majority of those were recent, since 2015, when burnout has gotten a bit worse. It seems like year after year, it just gets worse and worse. And we'll get into the pandemic as well. So the conceptual framework for this study was the model of teacher emotion. You could see up here on the slide. This model was developed by Fried and colleagues in 2015. Now, it's based on two main ideas. These are the main influences of teacher emotion that Fried and colleagues presented. They said personal characteristics and appraisals are the influences on teacher emotion. Personal characteristics, teacher identity, the skills and competencies that make them who they are as a teacher. And appraisals, you can see here from Lazarus, 1991, the internal assessment of information from an environment, basically a judgment of what you're learning, a judgment of what's around you. So what I drew on from this model is that teachers can utilize who they are as a person, the skills and competencies that make up their identity, that combined with the learning, through appraising information within PD sessions, all of that is going to help them function more effectively on what I coined the wellness pathway. And that's copyright right there. The journey from feeling burnt out to managing and regulating your emotions more effectively. So the methodology for this study involved interviews with participants, Denver Public Schools teachers. This was volunteer sampling conducted from an email invitation sent to publicly available email addresses from teachers off the DPS website. These structured interviews were conducted over Zoom, just like this, and participants could validate everything they said by taking a look at the transcript during the interview. And they also signed an informed consent protecting not just their personal information, but just for participation in the study and their acknowledgement of all names, places redacted, no mention of specific people or students, teachers, administrators, none of that. These structured interviews with 10 different teachers gave a lot of transcripts for data analysis. So I did some inductive and deductive coding. For those of you that don't know, inductive is, coding from the literature. So I looked at all the mentions of personal characteristics and appraisals and what people thought of the PD, what people thought of their own skills and competencies and building relationships with students and within the classroom and without. Deductive coding was just straight from their answers. Everything they said developed into a code. Also, just got to mention, every part of this study, trustworthiness and ethical considerations were taken into account. So here we get to the nitty-gritty good stuff. The 5 major themes that were revealed in the data from this study. So the first theme, aligning with research sub-question 1, was that burnout's a problem. It's a major problem. And it's gotten worse since the beginning of the pandemic. Also, I should mention that this study began very early on in the pandemic. So there was not a lot of literature reviewed on the effect of the pandemic for teachers during, effect on their burnout, but it revealed itself in the data for sure. The second theme, aligning with primary research question, was the poor facilitation and format of these PD sessions. Participants felt there has to be an external facilitator. They felt the groups of teachers needed to be smaller, and they felt that these all group school-wide PD sessions were still focused on the students, and they wanted it focused on teachers, because burnout is within the teacher themselves. And it's something that, the more you start thinking about students and student-centeredness, the more pressure you start to feel on the job. Third theme, also aligning with the primary research question, was that these PD sessions are not a long-term solution to burnout. Participants felt that it was a short-term political solution mandated on schools. They had philosophical objections to the PD sessions themselves, and it was just created a time infringement. Teachers are busy enough during the workday, and to take time out of their busy schedule to get into an auditorium and discuss their own burnout when they could be planning or grading or meeting with students. They just felt that it was not a solution during the school day as well. The fourth theme, aligning with research sub-question 2, was that the PD sessions increase self-awareness of the teacher. And the fifth theme as well, aligning with research sub-question 2, the PD sessions increase social emotional knowledge in teachers. So as mentioned, here's a breakdown of how the major themes align with the research questions from my study. You could see the primary research question really taking a look at not the aspects of the PD itself, but how it was facilitated, the format of it, the reason for it. Those themes really identified themselves, and they may seem negative right now, but these sort of answers are what's going to make the PD session better for teachers everywhere. So I really welcomed those responses. Research sub-question 2, obviously, every single participant that I interviewed acknowledged that burnout's a problem. And a lot of them said it's worse since the beginning of the pandemic. Research sub-question 2 really taking a look at the specific activities in the PD session to support teacher wellness. Teachers said, yeah, I became more self-aware and it increased my social emotional knowledge. So yeah, as far as implications for theory and practice, let's talk about the theoretical and practical implications here. The results showed that social, cultural, and political factors, which were identified very broadly by Fried and colleagues in 2015, things like the pandemic, things like the Black Lives Matter social justice movement, these factors influenced teacher emotion greatly, and it really had nothing to do with the day-to-day class-by-class interactions with students. It's just something that's influencing emotion constantly. Also, the personal characteristics and identity of each teacher showed a great deal of influence on their emotion, on their burnout itself. Appraisals, the specific appraisal of the PD session itself was influential on their emotion. It came through in their responses. And this isn't just the appraisal of the PD session. It's the appraisal of your environment. It's how you react to students in the classroom. It's how you react to colleagues. It's how you react to PD sessions in general. As far as the practical implications, again, I mentioned the need for an external facilitator. Participants really felt practically that this PD session cannot be facilitated by an assistant principal or a principal. The power struggle going on in that relationship really makes it difficult to be open, honest, and reflective about your own role in your emotion in the classroom. They felt smaller groups of teachers would have been more intimate. And again, they felt the orientation of the PD sessions should be more teacher-centered. So recommendations for future research. Number one, I think personally it'd be wise to explore teacher sessions of a regularly scheduled emotional management PD. A lot of the participants I interviewed did not have this regularly. They did it maybe once in the beginning of the year or once at the end of the year, and it was not built into the PD's schedule. It was random and it was out of the blue, and that's why they felt that it was a political move in a lot of cases. Secondly, it'd be wise to research the influence of teaching experience on teacher emotional wellness. A lot of participants had varied responses depending on their experience level. Over half the teachers I interviewed had a lot of experience, but there were some participants that had very little teaching experience, and a lot of their responses were shared in the amount of teaching experience they had. So it'd be interesting to take a look at a study like that. Also, it'd be wise to compare teacher perceptions of wellness in urban areas versus rural areas. Now, this was only mentioned by a couple participants, but I thought it was interesting because there were some conflicting responses on whether burnout is worse or better in urban versus rural and the type of support that different teachers receive. So it'd be interesting to take a look at a study like that. Moving on, conclusions. I just put it up here. Opportunities do exist for institutions to incorporate this type of PD, these emotional management components. And in doing so, they should heed the advice, the results from this study, improve the facilitation format and orientation of the emotional management components within the PD. Personally, my big takeaway, it's got to be consistent. Number one, it's got to be smaller groups of teachers. And first and foremost, it's got to be a really comfortable setting without an assistant principal or a principal there, because that definitely influences how teachers engage in the PD session. So yeah, I'd like to leave some time for questions, but I'd obviously like to thank everyone for the opportunity to discuss my research here. My email is up here, michael.robinson@uagc.edu. Feel free to contact me anytime. Personal, professional, whatever, I am available. And here are just a couple references from the slides. We could take a look at this. But yeah, thanks so much. And I'm excited for questions and discussion on this.
So we do have a couple of questions. They are coming in as we're speaking. The first question is, do you think professional development needs to be changed in terms of format in order to be effective? And I would ask you to explain why or why not.
Absolutely. Great question. And, you know, I've been through a lot of different PD sessions at a lot of different schools, like I mentioned. And, you know, I think some schools that have high morale and good relationships between teachers and administrators, I think those PD sessions are always more beneficial. And it just comes down to the culture of the school and the culture of the teaching staff and the culture of the administration and how they relate to the teachers. But all in all, you know, I think every school is different because every administrator plans and, you know, follows through on these PD sessions in a different way. So it's hard to tell. But I think something like this that's been implemented in DPS specifically is going to be productive if this advice comes through. If you're going to run this PD session, use those takeaways: smaller groups, consistent, and non-administrative facilitator.
Okay, so then we have, thank you, Dr. Robinson. Your passion for creating comfortable spaces for students to learn is so inspiring. I enjoyed learning about how teachers need more conscious thought and thoughtful support to develop their own internal emotional management tools throughout their professional development. The question here is, how do you think your personal experience with other cultures has impacted your specific approaches to understanding and improving teacher wellness and mitigating burnout?
That's such an excellent question. And it goes back to why I began this study in the first place. You know, I have a philosophy of, you know, teenagers are teenagers. Whether they're in the United States, whether they're in China, whether they're in Canada, whether they're on the North Pole. And, you know, a lot of teachers complain about teenagers, but honestly, for me, they're teenagers and they care about being heard, being respected, being listened to. And it's all about building that relationship, whether you're in the inner city, whether you're on the North Pole or in a rural area. I feel like my experiences and that philosophy itself kind of came through with my own burnout, because I never actually believed that you can't reach every student. I put so much pressure on myself to say, you know what, I am going to reach students. I'm going to reach them 100% too. I'm going to reach every single person in my classroom, in my school, even if they're not in my classes. And I think putting that pressure on yourself and those high expectations is going to make you feel burnout, because it's never enough. You know, you never feel like you've done enough. And I was raised that the right effort and the right attitude, you can accomplish anything. But towards the end of my career, I felt like it couldn't be reached. I couldn't get to that point where I felt like I made a difference with 100% of students. And that's tough.
We have lots of very positive comments about your presentation, but there is another question. Clearly, a burnt out teacher cannot deliver the best learning experiences for students. Yes, the workload and expectations of teachers are constantly increasing. Did your research explore whether there is any connection between these two instances, and how professional development can address and influence the resolution of this problem?
That's another great question. I really appreciate everyone being engaged in the chat and asking great questions and all the positive comments too. I appreciate it. Um, I think this type of PD, what it focuses on is what's called cognitive reappraisal in a more scientific term. It's taking a look at your own emotions and figuring out where that came from. So I think what this PD teaches teachers in a way is to figure out your own emotional triggers. And the more you know about your own emotional triggers, the more you can compose yourself, whether it's in the moment or later on in a conversation, and be honest with students. And that's something I always held as a belief is be kind, be honest, and do what you say you're going to do. And that's what I taught my students throughout the years. And if you're honest with yourself and you say, look, I'm feeling this because I have some emotional baggage around this issue, then you're bringing the relationship with the student to the forefront. And that's the real issue. It's not why they said what they said in the classroom, but more why you're triggered by it. And I think the more that teachers attend these PD sessions, the more they look at those emotional triggers that set them off, whether it's anger, sadness, or whatever emotion that you're dealing with in that moment. This kind of teaches you to pause, teaches you to take a breath, and it teaches you to figure out, all right, like I'm feeling this way because I have a history with example one, example two, and I think that's important for teachers, even the most, resilient, strongest, longest tenured teachers out there. Everybody gets set off at certain moments. And the key is acknowledging those triggers.
Okay, we have two more questions here before we wrap up.
Okay.
Do you think business corporations do a better job managing burnout and employee stress than maybe, say, academia? Love this question, Bill Davis. And I agree they are all different, but how can HR help? And what about employee assistance programs?
Great question, Bill. Thank you, Dr. Davis, for your engagement too and everything. I feel like businesses are in the same category as academia, in that it's all dependent on that culture and that the mutual respect among leadership and employees, just like it is among administration and teachers. It's all about that building relationship component and about the culture and the engagement from the teachers. If there's high morale among employees, there's chances are there's going to be lower burnout. So I think a lot of this transfers from academia to the business world in a lot of different ways. And I think the more that we're open and honest about burnout, and the more we can have PD sessions that really address, what's making you feel this way. Let's look at the triggers and what's going on, and let's look at the relationships.
Okay. And then our final question, and I like this question as well. It says, who inspires you? Because you have inspired me, Dr. Robinson. And Trenton Watson asked this.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Watson. I really enjoyed your presentation this morning as well, and you inspire me likewise. My inspiration, throughout my teaching career were the teachers and coaches that I had growing up. They really made an influence on my life, and I wanted to relate to students and players in the same way. I wanted to not just be a teacher in the front of the room. I wanted to be a member of the family, and I hold that with me to this day. And I treat colleagues the same way, and I treat students at UAGC the same way. We're all in this together, and I just want to be a positive influence and a support for people.
Thank you for your presentation today. We really appreciate it, and congratulations again.
Thanks so
So
much.
this was our last presentation of our 3-day research symposium. I thank everyone for attending our 4th annual research symposium over the past 3 days. A special thank you to Dr. Sundstrom for coordinating our symposium and providing all of us the opportunity to hear about the wonderful research our students are doing. Thank you to all of the students who participated, and congratulations to our new graduates. We invite everyone to visit our research symposium site and to view the recordings of all of the presentations that have been made during the past 3 days. E-posters highlighting other research our students are doing are posted there as well, so please take a look at those. And so this concludes our 4th annual research symposium. Thank you everyone for your attendance.